Hey crew, Pete here with Coaches on the Couch. This week I have the pleasure of Brad Donald, welcome, the Australian Jillaroos coach and also the NRL Elite Program Manager. Now his past obviously comes from, it's good that we sort of have a catch up because he comes from my neck of the woods, which is in the Central West. He's originally from Bathurst, but he also coached one of my sides I played with, his Orange Sims. But he started out, like most coaches, we all got to start somewhere, and he cut his teeth with the under-13s and the 14s and then the 18s, am I correct?
That's right, yep.
With the Bathurst Panthers, and then sort of went into the men's with the First Division, then obviously to Orange, and then the SG Ball down in Canberra. SG Ball, just for the folks at home, what age group's that?
Yeah, at the current stage it's 18s, and it was 18s while I was there too. So.
Under 18s,
yeah.
And then ended up being asked to come and do the Queensland Women's Rugby League team. So that's why I've got Brad to give us a different perspective on his philosophies and also his insights, but also the direction of Women's Rugby League. So, it's building a game which I feel on that side, Rugby League as a whole is really grasping that the women involved in it. And it's good to see, we've got a local guy that's come up and not an NRL sort of elite player that's sort of taking the role, so it's showing our other coaches out there the other possibilities we have. So my first question is, why Rugby League and why Women's Rugby League?
Oh mate, Rugby League, I think for anyone that's been involved in the game, it's more than footy. It's more than a game. It's a family, and basically I'm fortunate enough to say that nearly everything that I've got in my life as an adult has come because of footy. A network of friends. I met my wife through footy. Every experience we've sort of had our move. We've moved towns a number of times has been because of footy. So pretty much that's what people you wish you could tell the kids that they're growing up that it's not just a game. It's basically a lifestyle and a family. So
yeah. And the direction of Women's Rugby League, how did that bring you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always had a passion for coaching, and I wasn't the greatest player. In fact, I was a really crappy player, but I loved the game.
So, we'll go on that one.
Yeah, and look, mate, I probably could have been a better player. Like if I was, I'm 5'7" and I played most of the time in the front row, so I wasn't
You're unorthodox for a front row.
Yeah, and very unorthodox. I just loved the game. I loved being around the boys, and I loved being around footy. So, I sort of, when I got the opportunity as a young fella and signed a contract with Bathurst Penguins at the time, we got asked to help out one of the junior sides, and we jumped straight into that. Pretty much from day dot, playing for Bathurst. So just to give back and try and help some younger players, and from that it just became a passion, and it's led us to where we are now, which is there's a lot of water under the bridge, a lot of teams, and ended up in the women's space.
It's interesting you went on to coach Queensland, and I suppose from our neck of woods when it's Origin time, and that you're coaching Queensland, yet you're from New South Wales. How does that sort of work when you first come up and started doing the Queensland team?
Yeah, well, it's easy for me to justify, and the Queensland team at the time was a residence team. So a number of girls that played in the Queensland side originally from Bathurst, from New South Wales, and we actually we had a Jillaroos that played for Queensland for a long time in Tani Norris.
Tani's an Orange girl as well.
Who's from Orange. So, with players like that had gone, I sort of thought, I can jump in and help out here. So, and wear the maroon. And at the time, I was the Queensland development manager, so I was pretty much responsible for all the teams below Origin. Yeah. So it was really important for me to get in and lead by example. So I didn't have a problem with it. I did get in trouble once for when New South Wales took the shield, and I was at the footy on the back page of the Courier Mail catching up with a couple of players that I'd coached in Canberra who were playing for New South Wales. In my New South Wales gear with my two sons in blues, I did get a phone call from the chairman the day after, and I explained to him that's why Origin was born. You can't take away from the Origin and where you're from. So responsible for Queensland all the way down, and was, but Origin's Origin, and always be a blue.
Yeah, I understand it. I'm the same. It's an interesting time when up here with the friends and family and so forth. So at that time with coaching, now you're in the Elite program. We were talking earlier that you're sort of helping out with Mal underneath the programs that sort of, which is the elite program we have, what do you learn from your coaches and where you've gone from that side of it to impart onto your players now, like philosophies and traits that you've learned that now you sort of impact into your coaching with the girls and also with the guys that have come through?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've always been big on, and I learned it probably more so, I did a couple of years as a school teacher, and have had exposure to good teachers and good coaches along the way. There's not too much difference whether you're coaching an under-7s team, you're coaching an elite team. The mechanics become a little bit more complex, but really, the greatest philosophy that I've found is just making better people. Like making better people make better players, and we've got a little saying in the Jillaroos squad is, better people make better Jillaroos, and I know Mal subscribes to the same theory. We're very fortunate at the top because we've got a pool of players that we can select from. And if you don't fit the bill and you're not willing to buy into the team values and culture, then it's easy for us to change. But some of the greatest things that have happened to me in coaching, I can honestly say, I've coached my son's side through from under 6s. Is that in a number of years there, we got every kid returned to play. Like that to me is one of the greatest achievements in my coaching career. And then I was fortunate enough to coach a side in Bathurst in the under-18s in 2000, and I got a phone call only a couple of years ago about one of those players that had achieved something significant in his life, and I hadn't heard from him for about 5 or 6 years. And he rang me 3/4 full of drink, but like he rang me in the middle of the night, and I took the call, and he told me about an achievement that he made the Australian team for the Hawaiian Ironman. So things like that just show that you must have meant something to the player somewhere along the line, and you help them become a better person. And that for me is like what coaching's about. It's about having a life-changing experience, or not a life-changing experience, but helping mould futures for your players.
It's interesting. I've had a quote that sort of sits with me a long time. I forget where it came from, but coaches will impact more young people in 1 year than it will in most people's lives. And it's resonated really well on that basis, because as you just mentioned then, you've impacted one life that's gone on and done something else, but the way we coach today, and I think I was listening to one of your interviews a while back in regards, it's not what we coach, it's why we coach and how we coach. That sort of comes down to it now. It's not about the fundamentals of the game anymore. It's about how you give it, because we all learn in so many different ways, and you're probably learning that, especially going from the men and to the women, they've got different learning patterns. Being married, yes, I learned different ways of communication with my wife to communicating with the boys.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's not what you coach, it's how you coach is certainly one thing that we've been really strong on trying to deliver to junior coaches of both men and women, right, and male and female, because a lot of the time we'll see a drill, and coaches will ask for a drill, and that's just occupying your players. We need to really look at what the coach is doing while he's doing that drill. Look at the encouragement that he's giving little Johnny as he moves through. He's coaching on the run, he's keeping them all moving. After training, he's scruffing his hair and making him feel like he belongs as part of the group. Those sorts of things are just as important, if not more important, than actually teaching catch, pass, carry, and all the fundamentals of the game, in my mind. And then you just touched on the differences between the male and the female communication. Well, it's poles apart, and I had a baptism of fire when I came in, and I quite often tell this story, but I originally got asked, and I fell into the women's space by accident. I'd moved here even though I was reluctant, because I didn't want to give up my coaching opportunities in Canberra, and I got told to come up here and basically work with a group of people in the game development space, and they'd find some coaching for me. And when I arrived, the first team that they wanted me to assist with was a women's team based here in southeast Queensland. And I went to the session. I went with another young fellow who'd just come out of the Newcastle system and knew the Newcastle system back to front. And we set up a really good training program, we thought, and we sort of verbally told the girls what it was, and they went out and they did it in about half an hour quicker than what we imagined. And we just went, well, these girls are really quick learners. There was a number of girls that had played for Australia in the team. And what happened was, after training, this was the sharpest learning curve in my life.
Yeah.
There was a lineup of players after training. Like, I just thought everybody, normally, tools down, everybody splits, they go.
Go their own way.
Every single player lined up, and I was amazed at, like, everybody come along, they just wanted to get that connection with the coach, tell me a little bit about themselves, ask a few questions, and off they went. And I had one girl that was sort of waiting around the back, and I was thinking, she must really want to have a private conversation. And she's come to me and she's basically divulged a whole bunch of information. She said, I'm a little bit overweight. And I said, oh, okay, do you want me to help you with some nutrition advice? No. I'm not as fit as what I should be. Do you want me to help you with a training program? No. Anyway, we went through about 6 or 7 different things. And she walked off happy after about 20 minutes. And I stood there just scratching my head. And I thought, I don't know what's happened. And I went home and I told my wife, and she said, you're a bullhead. I've been telling you this for years. Women just want to be heard. They don't want you to fix all their problems.
And and for any of the males out there and coaches, there's a good book. It's called Women from Venus and Men Are from Mars. That's where I learned in regards to, we have a habit of trying to fix everything.
Yep.
And come up with solutions and all this sort of stuff, but 99% of the time they've already got the solutions there. They just want to be heard, and that's probably a big point in regards to, if you're coaching the ladies, they just want to be heard. They don't need a problem fixed. They just want to work out how we can get through and then go from there. So that's a good insight, especially the wife giving you that.
Oh yeah, no. So now I just listen.
You learned to listen. We got 2 ears, 1 mouth.
That's right. And look, that's one of a myriad of differences between the men and the women. Like, I've done some research in recent years, and I've learned a lot on the run as well. But they are a lot different to men. They're much more coachable. If I ask you to come up with 5 egotistical male sportsmen, you could probably come up with 100. If I asked you about the same question about a female, you would struggle. You really would. They're so coachable. They'll listen, but they require an awful lot of feedback. And that just takes an awful lot of time. And they want that connectiveness with the coach and their players. So there's also a lot of brain power and a lot of work goes into making sure that group stays together and working towards a common goal. Yeah, and
good point. We get the other things that I work on the psychology of just in general. And the funny part is that women need to get at least 20,000 words out, where a male only has to get 8,000 words out. Statistically, they've sort of worked out, and you sort of understand when you're, as a coach, you've got them lined up, and yet the boys, and I find it now coaching it, like, you sort of, do you understand? They just give you a nod of the head, and then they can go out and do the drill, and they still have no idea exactly what you've talked about, where the girls will go, they want to know the whys. I remember when I had an interview with Shara Roma about the women boxing, and she said the difference was is they want to know the whys. They always go, why do we do this and why do we do that? And so the guys just go out and do it. Then they ask the whys when it's all broken down, and they can't understand it. Where the girls go, why am I doing this to start with? Well, then you give them the fundamentals, and away they go. And they pick it up a lot easier then. Absolutely. They just need to know where it all fits, where they fit. And like I said, if you can get in front of that, and actually everybody understands what their job is on the field, they need to know it inside out, you can do some wonderful things. And like you said, the ego gets in the way of the male athletes sometimes. And I spoke before about coaching my young fellas team, and like I've had in the past 9 and 10-year-old kids going, why are we doing this? And I was thinking, I'm answering to a kid that's been playing footy for about 2 years, and that's just the male ego. You never got that. Like I've never had that from an elite female player. They just want to know where they fit, what they can do, how they can contribute to the whole team's cause. Perfect. That's it, going to it. And you mentioned before, because obviously with the Jillaroos and the success they're having, it's the culture. You mentioned something before, and that's we've talked about, and it seems to be coming up a fair bit now. It's changing the culture within clubs and within teams, because if you don't have the right culture, it doesn't matter what sort of players, and it's been proven you can spend as much money on teams as you want, but if you don't have the right culture, you won't get the success you're looking for. You might have immediate success straight away, but then it just doesn't, it's not long-term success. Would that be true, and the same with the Jillaroos
Oh,
in regards to the culture that you've got there now?
Yeah, absolutely. And like as a coach, I like to use the word facilitator because I was fortunate enough to be successful in applying for this position and entrusted with it. But I quickly learned that I was a facilitator of the team, and basically all of the other bits and pieces. Culture is made up of a whole bunch of turning wheels, and those are the players and everything that goes into it. So we worked really hard on the culture, what had been passed on to them from the past, and where they wanted to go. And basically, you've just got to, when they set the rules, that makes it easy. So the team set the rules, and basically it was our job to just make sure that we implemented the rules. So it was really easy conversations to have if somebody didn't meet a target that the team had put together, because they'd contributed to putting together that team. So there's some interesting articles and blogs out there around the herd, and everybody moves as a herd, and you get cut from the back of the herd unless you raise the standard and you meet the herd's basically the herd's culture and beliefs. So and we work on the same principle, and it was really successful for us it's been really successful for us over our last 18 months, and it's been really successful in these girls. They didn't just want to win the World Cup, they wanted to facilitate, or they wanted to be they wanted to incite change and launch an NRL competition, which we saw happen a couple of days ago. So it was a much bigger piece around the movement in our sport for women.
And that's a great point you touched on there, Brad, in regards that a lot of us, and from my past experience and now teaching players and athletes of different sports, it's all about the long-term benefit. You just mentioned something there, the girls, it wasn't about winning the World Cup, it was about creating something bigger. And that's where I think, especially a lot of the guys in sport need to look at, it's not about the immediate success of winning a premiership this year. What's it going to give you long-term? What is your benefit? Because the success will come if you've got a longer-term thing of how you're going to help out. And you talked about the herd as well. That comes back to the culture as well, because sometimes it might be with this team, it might be a new herd that you need to line up with, that lines up with your values and your principles, and where your longevity of what you're looking for in the end. So it's a great point you've got there on that. So with that notion that you've given there on culture, the herd, the long-term aspects of what the girls had, out of women's sports today, who would you say is a great sports role model a woman that's a great role model in sport today?
Yeah, I'm just getting hairs on the back of my neck standing up thinking about this, because for me, it's hard to say one. I'm actually inspired by the whole movement and by all the women that I'm fortunate enough to work with. They are an amazing bunch. They're so humble, they work so hard, and if something comes their way, they're happy for it to come their way, but they're not barking for more. If I was to narrow it down to one, and it's because she lives every ounce of the culture of the team, and has probably driven it for a very long time, it'd be Karen Murphy. And Karen was the captain of the team for an awful long time. She was the captain of the team that I first spoke about when I got involved in the women's game for the very first time, and she was coming towards the end of her career. But the reason that she's a role model for me is she's a role model for all the attributes she gave on the field, but she's also a role model for everything she's done off the field. She was one of Queensland's top police women. She's now the head of the integrity unit at the NRL. She's very well respected by the players. She's extremely humble. She's probably she's probably the greatest player to ever play the game in the women's space, but you'd never know. She's very quiet, and she goes about her business. So she's an outstanding role model. She gets the balance between pushing the girls into the semi-professional and professional area, and not doing it too quickly. And because of that, because she's such a great role model, the other girls follow her. So I'm very fortunate to have her as an assistant coach as well, and work with her day to day in the NRL now that she's moved from the Queensland Police Service.
Great. And then Karen, that was where I was sort of leading to as well. Where do the other ladies, girls all coming through, they sort of go to her to get that advice? And because doesn't matter how we look at it from a point of view, the females are always going to connect better with the female because obviously they've got a completely different energy from the masculine energy. So sometimes by having that balance as well, like you're giving the instructions, but when it comes to some of the other insights that the females can get delivered in a different way, and there's that way Karen sort of fits in, where so many people come up and she's so humble, but she's also got a bigger picture of what the game's all about. She's able to give back, and she's attracting all the girls coming through to learn more.
Yeah, and she's like it's really good because it's a nice little litmus test of what's going on in the group, and you've got to be a great communicator to work with females. So, like, I think, you know, some coaches, if you're not a good communicator, it's really difficult, and I've learnt that through other coaches in other codes of the women. So you've got to be really good. Now, Karen knows what's going on in the group, so she's got a nice little understanding, and the girls do go to her, so it helps us to temper things when they're not right and just get an overall balance of what's happening in the team. So yeah, she's fantastic like that. She's fantastic. The girls will go to her on advice what's happening in their personal lives, and you know, she's done so well with her career outside of rugby league too, and just making those girls understand that rugby league isn't everything. It's like it's certainly it's a big part of what you are and who you are, but you know, we've got careers and families and all sorts of other things, and so she's great when it comes to that.
Helps out with that balance. So, with your coaching and what is the best advice you've been given, and who was it? Do you remember who it was given to you by?
Yeah, no, I do remember, and it was given to me. I was a development officer in Central West, and I'd had a couple of opportunities come up to move to some NRL clubs, and it's a difficult thing to do with a young family. We'd had an 18-month-old baby, and my wife was strongly connected to the Central West with a big family. And one of my former bosses, Steve Palin, said to me, he said, look, I've got this advice that I got given when I was younger. And he said, you never regret the things in life you do. You only regret the things you don't do. Yeah. And pretty much from that point on, that's something that we've lived by. And it's seen us move a number of times and take opportunities and never once regret knocking back an opportunity that's come our way. So and I've passed that on too, and you know, as fate would have it, you know, his son ended up working for me, and he's just taken a new role as the Queensland Game Development Manager, which was something that a job that I'd had a number of years ago, and his son's followed that same advice, and it's just great. It's really good advice that I've given to a number of players when they had the opportunity to relocate to Canberra a bit for just a train to trial. And they think, you know, what about the doctor? What about my job? I think if you make that commitment to come, or you make that commitment to go, everything else falls into place, and it's been great for us.
Yeah, and you probably resonated with exactly the same thing. My stepdad moves, and I still remember it there. He just said, don't get to the back end of your life and say, what if? And it goes to, what if I'd done this, and what if I'd done that? It's just, and I've done a lot of things, and sometimes you go, well, and some people laugh at the things I've done, but at the end of the day, I've gone, okay, tick, tried that. But the only way we can learn more is by putting ourselves fully into it. And as you said, the young blokes going into it, it's not worrying about this, that, and the other, because that'll be part and parcel. If you put your intention into where you're going to, the other stuff just flows with it. And understanding more of the psychological backgrounds of where we go with things and what intentions we put out there, it's surprising the things that all fall into place when we do that, and comes up to. So obviously you mentioned a couple of things. What sacrifices have you had to do to be successful as a coach?
Yeah.
Besides the family.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And this is something we spoke about actually in our Jillaroos tighter group about the word sacrifice, because a couple of them had a problem with sacrifice, and I definitely made some sacrifices, but it's taking an opportunity if you think of it in a positive light. Yep. And that's something that I've learned, and from taking that opportunity, we've lived in Canberra for 5 years and never got to go to the snow or take my boys to the snow because obviously footy is everything, and footy's over weekend and it's winter, so we missed out on things like that. I do miss out on a lot of time with my family, but I look at it as an opportunity that my boys have had some incredible experiences because of it. They've got to meet some, they're footy mad as you would be in a footy household. They spent a week with the Kangaroos in Fiji last year before the World Cup. They've done some things that kids would only dream of doing. So the opportunities that have come our way definitely have made up for the time that I've had to spend away from home. And I've got a very understanding wife who knows that this women's movement takes some time. And when the phone rings and it's one of the girls and it's after hours, she understands that it's it must be important. And and she's a great sounding board too, and a great friend of all the team. And that's been important for us as well, to make sure that everybody outside of that playing group is connected. So it's definitely family, because I'm a family man and I love my family so much, but it's also created a lot of opportunities for them.
Which goes back to what your coach said, is you don't miss those opportunities that come about, because it's giving you different experiences. So, and it's great you pointed out there is that by reframing it, it's not sacrifices, it's what new opportunities it's going to open up. Because if a lot of people don't do this, because I look back at some of the sacrifices. I couldn't go out in the drink with the boys, or I couldn't go to a party, but it's opened up so many different opportunities. Like I remember my playing days to get to Sydney was giving up the alcohol and going up with the mates for a couple of nights, to then get to travel all over the world playing football, and then now doing what I do back here. And it's interesting, it's about reframing. It's not sacrifice. It's okay, what opportunities is it going to create for me, because that positive just created that opportunity, has created that, and then by that you're also expanding your wife and the boys on what they've got to do, and they're getting different experiences as well, so they can then portray that out. So it's like a bigger effect.
Absolutely, it just comes down to choice. It's a choice. So you make the choice to take that time away, or like if I go back to the Canberra thing, I made a choice to be involved in the footy club and coach the team and be right involved with it, rather than go and enjoy the snow experience. That'll come later on. We talk about choices all the time. And then what that does too is it helps, and being a leader and a role model for my boys too, to show them that it's not about what you miss out on, it's about what you actually jump into and what choice you make.
It's not short-term games, it's a long-term game.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting, you sort of point there that the opportunities you presented to your sons going forward. So based on that and the experience that you've given to the players that are around you, and you've conquered a lot in the years. I think, was it 18 years you said? I think we were speaking before, you've been in the coaching.
Yeah, no, I've been coaching since '98, so we're getting on for 20 years, I think, and a lot of grey hair.
Yeah, and would you say you've been working, or you've just been turning up and doing what you love to do? Yeah, no, I actually say this to a lot of people. I've been fortunate enough to employ a lot of people into the NRL system over the years, that in the nearly 18 years that I've been full-time in working in the game, I've never had an understanding of people getting cranky on a Monday, because Monday, although sometimes Mondays might not even be the start of the week for us because we've worked all weekend, but you just don't mind. Like, you love what you do, you roll into work, and it could be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It doesn't really matter, and that's probably something that I always say to candidates when they come to work at the NRL, that like, there's one good thing: we might not pay that great, but I can tell you that you won't be worried about a Monday ever again, because if you love what you do and you love the game, you're going to love being part of the game. Yeah, but you probably mentioned something before about the challenges and that, which I put into the players. If you play full out, or in the coaching, if you coach full out, and give what you need to, then the other stuff will come back on the end of that as well. So what advice would you give to coaches? What's one piece of advice you would give to coaches coming through to create more success?
Outside of that, like in terms of coaching the team, it is about definitely making better players, like better people. You're working on the people and giving them greater insight into life than just catch, pass, carry and tackle. If you're an aspirational coach, I think it's like half of it's building the dream in your head.
Yep.
And like that's the advice that I would give. Like if and talk to aspirational coaches a lot, and you say, well, what do you want to do? Like, I want somebody that's involved in the women's space to come and say, I want your job, because if they've got that dream, they'll end up with it. Like it's we talk to young fellas all the time. You watch the V8 Holden Ute drive past, and you go, gee, I wouldn't mind one of those. I wouldn't mind one of those, and they dream for it long enough. And they know they can't afford it, but it ends up in the driveway because they've dreamt about it long enough. Vision, it's about having the vision and it's about having the dream in your head. So if you're an aspirational coach, then that's probably the best bit of advice that I could give. My goals have changed along the way, and that happens. But each goal's allowed me to have the next dream or the next vision.
And what about the ones that are just starting out, just for the kids, like they're only in the mini mod league sort of thing? Because the interesting part, and I suppose it's across a lot of sports, we get a lot of parents that come in that come from this level, this intention, but the intention really is only about this level. So any advice for coaching younger ones, what would be the best?
Most definitely. I'm really passionate about this area of the game, and I go back to even calling myself a facilitator. And when you're coaching those younger, what we tend to do is we try to just water down what happens with especially like if you're an ex-player, and we think an ex-player is going to be a great coach because they've got knowledge of the game. And I've got a belief that I think there should be more females coaching junior male sport, because we need people that are nurturing, have got a better sense of fairness, and increasing the fun around what they're actually doing, because it doesn't really matter. NRL players are definitely not made 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. Those kids that have got a little bit more talent, they rise above no matter what. So if you're coaching at those areas, like Mal and myself have talked about doing some campaigns, and the game's done a lot of campaigns. It's about just facilitating that environment and making sure that environment is fair, it's fun, and it's reasonable, and the kids are having a great time. Because if you do that, you're getting everything right. Like, you want those kids to come back. As soon as we start pushing a competitive environment on kids that are too young, they fall out of the game, we burn them out. We know that we're a late specialisation sport, so really it's not until the aspirational ages of 15, 16, 17 that we should be putting kids into a more elite's not the right word, because it's a more intense program, and just making sure that we keep as many kids as we can in the game, because there's some late bloomers.
I fully agree on that one, because I only looked at myself, like it wasn't until the early 20s before I even got the opportunity to go down to Sydney, and I didn't sort of play league until late into my teens. That's a great one there, is for the women in sport as well, coaching. Getting more in it, because they come with that nurturing, and there's a lot of women out there that really understand the game. I think I read in the Courier Mail last weekend, there was the first coach for the Valleys was a woman in one of the junior teams, which was good to see. So when you sort of look back at the end of your career, what's one thing you want to be remembered for?
Mate, hopefully ending up in this space. We've done an awful lot of work in the women's space, and I have a real sense of responsibility around making sure that those girls achieve what they've set out to. Like I said to you earlier, I thought it was just about winning the World Cup, but it was about something much bigger. And in my position at the NRL, I feel like I can be an agent for change and help. So hopefully be remembered for that, but also for all the other. I'll coach for a lot longer now, be it male, female, or whatever. It's just hopefully being somebody that gives good advice and hopefully helps players become better people, because like that to me is important. And if I can have an impact on one or two people's lives and for a positive effect, then I've done my job here. That's
exactly it, and that's where we got to look at it. And for coaches and young sports stars that are coming out, that they may not go to the elite level. It's not about the elite level at times, because there's only 1% can ever get there, but it's about how you can contribute back in other areas of life. And if you can build up good team morality, culture and so forth, it will take you into so many different areas, especially in business, because now a lot of businesses are looking for the exact same thing, is what's the culture like, how do you build relationships? They're probably the bigger ones that look at it. For a lot of guys, I went through the process when I was younger of being withdrawn and not talking and so forth, and I thought that's why I impart a lot of my knowledge now, is because I know what it was like going through there, not speaking up, and more so finding out more and wanting to develop more as a coach. So that's great to see that you want to change lives, and I think at the moment it's not going to be one or two that you've affected. I think it's going to be
Hopefully.
a bigger effect across there. So I'm going to throw a curveball out to you. You get the opportunity, you're going to sit down with three people in life. It can be past, it can be present. Who would you like to sit down and have a laugh, a beer and a drink and a feed with?
Yeah, no,
Talk about some stories.
You got me there. Like I'll probably give an answer a little bit. I'm not into popular people, or
Yep.
it's more so interesting. And for me, it's probably more personal. Like I had a grandfather that was he was a prisoner of war for 4.5 years in World War II, and unfortunately I lost him when I was about 18 or 19 years of age, and I was never quite brave enough to ask him about that. So if I ever got that opportunity again, I think I'd love to sit down and I learned a lot about him after he passed. So I'd like to know a little bit more about what happened there, and just because it really interests me about the resilience of those soldiers that they basically lived on nothing for an awful long time. What kept them going? What they were, and the analogy to coaching and life in general. When things got bad, those guys made it through. I'd really like to know a little bit of the psychology behind that.
Your grandfather, what's his name?
Yeah, his name was Jim Miller. Yeah,
Jim Miller.
And a very interesting man. I know he was a chemist, and he used all sorts of things that they found on the ground and that to stay alive. So very, very interesting, and I'd like to have the opportunity to ask him a few questions. I don't mind a good time, so like if there's a few crazy people out there. Somebody that's got a bit of money, like they take me for a good night out, I'd be happy with that.
Oh, well, that's all planned for, so you're going to sit down there and have a chat, so it's all covered for you, mate. You can just think of any other two. That's why I like Kurt, because it's interesting to get an insight of what people are looking for. Like your grandfather, the insight, like I can relate to that, because my grandfather, it wasn't until the back end of his life that I started to find out more about it, and I wished earlier I could find out a lot more to understand the resilience they had to go through. So So you've got Jim.
Yeah, the next one would be Nellie Doherty. She was, for not too many people would be familiar with the name, but the Interstate Challenge, which is the Queensland and New South Wales game, in the past about 20 years has been called the Nellie Doherty. It's actually the 20th year of the Nellie Doherty Cup, and they're about to change that to the Women's State of Origin. Now, she was a pioneer in Women's Rugby League, and she started the first ever games in New South Wales and copped a hiding in the papers because of it. And I think some of those old traditionalists didn't take too well, and the papers were probably written by the men, and some of the headlines were horrific. Like why would these women are going to have trouble finding a man in their life to look after, and it was horrible what they would have went through. And I just think some of the challenges that we're going through at the moment in the women's game have certainly been tough, but nowhere near as tough. So it'd be great to have somebody like that at the dinner table and see what she's been through, and wouldn't feel so sorry for ourselves, I think, if it'd be great to talk about where the game's come to because of people like that.
Great, good insight there from the female side, and someone that I'd read some articles about what was going on in those times, but Nellie Doherty is one. Jim Miller, your grandfather, and who's the third one?
Yeah, and again, like it's probably something a little bit more personal to me. I don't mind a good time, and I certainly had a good time with this person. And unfortunately, we lost him at a tender age of 39 with Dave Scott, and Dave was and Scotty, Big Scotty I played with Scotty, but I'd seen him coach. I never was actually coached by him, but he was a tremendous coach. And even when I went to Canberra, I used him there as a development coach in the Central West, and just a terrific fella. Loves a good time, a real people person. Anybody that had anything to do with him he'd bring a smile to your face. The big fella. I was in the World Cup, one of those emotional days where I was thinking, how did I get here? Like why am I so privileged to be in this position? I'd actually sent a message to Lizzie's wife and thanked her for the time that she would have given up with him to spend with us and teach us young fellas an awful lot about the game, and not just about the game. He was teaching us about like living life and being good people and a good bloke. So. It'd be great to have the big fella at the dinner table that might rock the boat with the other two, but yeah.
Well, we can't have all on the same playing field at times.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I do thank you very much, Brad, for spending the time on the couch. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Especially being a local boy, coming from the Central West. I know you're from Bathurst, so it's like south of the border stuff, and it's like you've been in Queensland and all that sort of stuff as well. But I do appreciate that, and I think for our coaches and parents and sports stars out there, especially with the women's game and how it's expanding, I think Brad is bringing so much more to the game itself, with the women's movement of just getting more involved and more exposure. And I think with the Elite game just being announced this week for the NRL and the Women's Code is even another step forward. But I think creating the great culture, but also for the coaches, teaching more than just the sport itself, it's teaching life skills. And remember, you're going to have more impact on the younger people than probably many will have in their lifetime. So that's where you've got to really impart that. So for that, I thank you very much, Brad. For the guys out there, until next time, make sure you play hard, play full out, and keep going after your dreams and making most of your opportunities. So until then, game on, my friends.